vile villain ever in comics is, all right? Now, I'm thinking off the top of my head, I don't really know who could be the most vile superhero. But then again, I'm not really tapped in because after playing Injustice, I found out DC was a banger, okay? I didn't even know. And all I know of Marvel is what's been in the movie. So I doubt this character has been on TV yet. So let's see.
I have truly never been more astounded by the lengths that a villain could go through
White Batman. Is that what we doing?
to achieve such a level of chaos than I have been by reading Nemesis. This
APM?
guy makes everything that the Joker, the Reverse Flash, and probably what any other villain has done combined look like child's play.
Oh, wow.
It's actually baffling. This guy who looks exactly like what I'd imagine Batman and Moon Knight's love child to be is the psychotic lunatic known as Nemesis. And he's exactly that. I mean, in the first pages of his comic, he hijacks the president's plane mid-flight, he kills the pilots, and then proceeds to crash land the plane on top of thousands of people, taking down several buildings, causing as much destruction and chaos as humanly possible. That is one way to start your comic. Nemesis would have the training, the gadgets, and the fortune to become the #1 villain in the world. And when I tell you he makes Griffith look like a good guy, I'm literally not kidding you. He's somehow leagues above him, if you can believe it. And after I'm literally...
I seen somebody yesterday with a shirt that says $20 is $20. It's a sick man, all right?
Not kidding you. He's somehow...
Police chief's daughter pregnant by her. What?
Leagues above him, if you can believe it. And after I read Nemesis' entire reading order, I was left shooketh at the guy's track record. To me, Nemesis is the most vile fictional villain I've ever read. This guy will do anything, and I mean anything, to get his way. He will murder, torture, maim, inseminate, and frame you for meeting minors, all to go according to his own insane scheme for revenge. He is so completely irredeemable that at times while reading I felt like I had to take a break and go take a shower, and I haven't felt that much darkness in me that I had to like wash it away since I watched the movie Requiem for a Dream. So that's a very incredible thing to make me feel so disgusting after reading that I had to go take a shower to wash away all of the horrendous shit that I read. And making this video, I honestly would not be surprised if this video gets like flagged and demonetized just for how crazy it gets, because it's just wild. He'll cross any boundary. Like, virtually any boundary. It's insane. So yeah, let's get into it. Initially, when reading his first series produced by Icon Comics, we are led to believe that Nemesis is also known as Matthew Anderson, heir to the Anderson fortune. The Anderson family smuggled children from the black market and were entirely awful people. Totally opposite of the Wayne family already. Soon they'd be caught red-handed, and not too long afterward, bored under the care of his uncle who now inherited a billion-dollar electronics company, Anderson ran away and traveled the globe to...
better than the Wayne Corporation, I guess. With how they made their money is bad, but I think like the whole premise of Batman is his family was super rich, all right, in a city where now the inflection of rich and poor, crime goes up because there's really rich people, and you know they just got their money. Maybe a better way. The cause may have been the same, who knows, I don't know.
To learn the ways of crime. By the age of 12, he was a gang lord. By 15, Asia's largest drug exporter. And at the age of 23, he felt he was ready to start his mother's dying wish. And that would be destroying the clever police officer. At this point in Nemesis' career, he is an expert in all things villainy, always seeming to know what's going to happen next and keeps a step ahead of everyone. Almost like he's similar to another pointy-eared hero we all know. Starting out his villainous career, he set out to destroy the lives of several police chiefs as practice before killing the now appointed police chief in Washington, Chief Morrow, the man who condemned his entire family to death. So when the story really begins, it's after a time in Tokyo where Nemesis is committing various acts of terrorism culminating in the murder of its police chief by having a bullet train run the chief over and explode the tunnel so that it'd fall over thousands of people, causing mass destruction. Yeah, I wasn't kidding. This is how the book starts. After this, Nemesis then turns his attention over to Washington, D.C. and its famed chief of police, Blake Morrow, sending Chief Morrow a calling card stating Blake Morrow, March 12th, at midnight, flatline still counts. Morrow immediately gives out the
mean?
order to put his family into protective custody, simultaneously planning ahead for what's to come from Nemesis, because Morrow knows the kind of reputation Nemesis holds. After this, his first act is the hijacking of Air Force One, which he crashes into the city, killing thousands, as I mentioned earlier in the video. Via a hijacked television signal...
Hold up, but how did he crash the plane? He don't got no super... He like Batman, bro. He got no superpowers. All right? Unless he does, but I need to get the backstory on that, man. Because ain't no way you crashing a Boeing plane, all right, as often as that happens these days, and surviving. There's no way.
Nemesis openly declares his intentions toward Washington and reveals he has the president. Following this, he poisons those within the Pentagon and reveals the veritable treasure trove of secrets contained within on the internet, on top of stealing all of the nuclear codes in the process. Striking back at Nemesis, Chief Blake sets up a trap involving a child and her heart transplant. Because Nemesis, the psychotic maniac he is, he just can't help himself but ruin the lives of children when given the chance. So after Nemesis steals the heart for the child's surgery, he goes on a killing spree, making the police force look like grade A fools with a capital F. However, in the process of escaping the police, Nemesis is captured by Blake Morrow, revealing the heart along with the surgery was just a ploy to get Nemesis out in the open. Nemesis was just carrying a pig heart the entire time, to which Nemesis mockingly tells the chief he planned to head for this. Days go by and everyone feels astoundingly safe now that Nemesis is locked up, so much so that Morrow gives the order to have his family come back home. But this doesn't last, because Nemesis doesn't even spend no longer than 15 minutes in prison before enacting the next step of his master plan, hiring people who work within the prison. They release Nemesis, who ends up killing 97 guards and releasing 2,000 inmates into the city. On top of this, Chief Blake discovers that his son and daughter are missing following this, captured by, you guessed it, Nemesis. And in exchange for their lives, Nemesis demands the chief to reveal 3 secrets, to which Morrow reluctantly tells Nemesis for the preservation of his children. Firstly, his wife Peggy had an affair with his former partner. Secondly, his son is homosexual. Thirdly, his daughter got pregnant and had an abortion. These 3 things reveal that Blake is a driven career man and placed greater emphasis on that side of his life, neglecting his family. Satisfied, Nemesis releases Blake's children unharmed. However, Blake's daughter is now pregnant by her brother via fertilization of her eggs. And as an added torture to Morrow, Nemesis ensures that if she has an abortion, she would be unable to bear children ever again. At this very moment reading this comic book, I was so viscerally appalled at the magnitude of evil Nemesis was willing to achieve that in truth, I wanted nothing more than to see this dude get murked. Because not only does he commit the most obscene thing imaginable to Blake's children, who are completely innocent and have absolutely nothing to do with this rivalry, but Nemesis also goes out of his way to do the most obscene thing imaginable to them just to fuck with Blake some more. This, you can imagine, creates a rift between Blake and his family indefinitely, and to add the cherry on top, Nemesis also releases to the public what happened to his kids. Now, through an undercover cop implanted in the low levels of...
Okay, now when they said got pregnant by the brother, okay, they said the fertilization of the eggs. Now, that can be done without... certain things happening, okay? But he hasn't really alluded to the fact whether those things happened or not, okay? So if anybody knows, let me know.
Nemesis's organization, Blake leads a raid at the home of Matthew Anderson, who it is hinted was masquerading as his uncle the entire time. However, the mansion is rigged to explode, killing most of the SWAT team. After this, Blake is captured, and Nemesis reveals his best friend of 10 years has been working with Nemesis the entire time, while also dropping the bombshell that he is not Matthew Anderson at all. That's right. The whole vengeance for his parents and destroyed childhood was nothing but a ruse. His whole backstory and motivation was nothing but a character he adopted to better destroy Chief Blake. Nemesis plans years in advance, planting moles and agents throughout the lives and organizations of his targeted police chiefs, confessing to Blake that he's nothing more than an extremely rich man who's just utterly bored and can only seek pleasure from ruining other people's lives. After killing his best friend brutally, Nemesis unveils his grand finale. They are in the Oval Office, and Blake's wife, along with the president, are both rigged with explosives. And it's here where Nemesis gives Blake a choice. Kill his wife, or the president. Blake...
Yo, hey. Sorry, Mr. President. I understand, but our country has a chain of command, okay? To replace you as you go forward. So... GG's in the chat to you, big dog.
is torn between the two.
Who y'all picking, president or your family? Let's be real. All right, let's be real.
But
now, unless you hate your wife, then Oh, listen, thank you for this gift. Boom, family gone.
President makes the choice for him. And this part was hella funny to me because when the president starts to approach Nemesis saying that he'll kill him, Nemesis in utter confusion is like, sir, I'm not entirely sure where this is going. Are you like an expert in kung fu or something I don't know about? Standing as close as possible to Nemesis, the president tells Blake to detonate his explosive, leading Blake and Nemesis to fight on the lawn on the outside of the White House. Blake manages to dog on Nemesis during the fight, while Nemesis pretty much cries to himself, making excuses like if the president hadn't blown up in his face, he'd be winning this fight right now. To which the fight comes to a close with the two shooting each other at the exact same time, seemingly killing each other. However, the chief survives his injuries, while Nemesis, despite claiming to be too rich to fail, does not. A little detail I'd like to remind you all of, too, that's a really nice touch to the story, is the calling card given to Blake in the beginning, stating that he'll die on the 12th and flatline still counts. Because that calling card ends up coming back into play when Blake flatlines on the table for a few minutes before getting brought back. And after this, Blake seemingly gets a happy ending as he devotes his time to his family. After his ordeal with Nemesis revealed to him what was really important. And in something of an epilogue, it is revealed in a card addressed to Blake that a mysterious gentleman runs a business catering to the dark fantasies of bored and wealthy people, giving these people an adventure for a short few weeks every year with artists and engineers working to create supervillainous characters for them to play. Whilst presently focused primarily in the Pacific Rim, a steadily growing client list is set to expand into the West. The letter tells Blake that he is safe from next year's supervillains and commends him for defeating Nemesis, even showing admiration for his choices between family and career. Remarkably too, Blake and his wife are given a bottle of the most expensive wine in the world, which has been waiting for them for 10 years, along crazy. With the letter, leaving you to kind of question if Nemesis is really truly dead. Yeah, he's super dead, which means this is the end of the video now.
Nope.
So don't forget to leave a like and subscribe, check out my Twitter, and as always, I'll catch y'all on the flip side.
Just kidding.
Psych.
Of course!
Nemesis is back, baby! We got Nemesis reloaded, because he's reloaded and ready to refire because he's locked and loaded. He's hiding under people's beds now, cracking smiles and sticking his tongue out while blowing people up. He's such a silly little goofball.
How did he not die?
This Nemesis story basically takes the things that happened before and reworks those story beats to make it a much more fluid and much better story. Taking things like the Matthew Anderson backstory from the previous story and making it Nemesis's origin among other story beats, which also segues us into this new Nemesis's origin. Now, who is Nemesis and how did he come to be? Again. Well, it all started with a string of 9 murdered hitchhikers found all over Los Angeles, mutilated, headless, and bug-ridden. An officer named Joe Costello, who's going to come back later on in the story, among other officers, were hell-bent on finding this killer. And they did on Matthew's 10th birthday, when they beat the shit out of his parents and flipped his entire world upside down. After which he never saw his parents again, because not too long after being in prison, they were given the lethal injection. After this, Matthew was sent to live in a corrupt orphanage where kids were used to serve the mob, leading Matthew to run away and try to make it on his own, picking pockets and living out of trash cans. Until one day he attempted to pickpocket a young lady in a diner, which brought Matthew to an avenue in life he'd never expect to go down. The young lady, seeing his raw potential, would extend an invitation for Matthew to meet his boss to make serious cashola, but it's a one-time offer. Reluctantly, Matthew accepts and drinks coffee offered to him by the lady, where he next awake to the sounds of chanting and drums.
Dog. I get invited to something like this and I see the little monsters from freaking Resident Evil 4 congregated with a man. Listen, I'm sorry. I know I took the offer. It's time for me to go home, though. I'm out of here.
Surrounded by several cultists as the leader shouts that Matthew is now in the circle, and if he attempts to leave, they'll set the dogs on him. Throwing down a spear to Matthew, they tell him that to earn his position, he has to prove that he's worthy by killing the opponent beside him. At first, Matthew doesn't seek to kill the kid, but once he realizes that this kid won't hesitate to kill him, he fights back until his opponent can no longer draw breath. After winning, Matthew was sent to his next trial. The next trial was in Yosemite Falls, and the challenge was to hold on for 3 whole days without losing grip under a waterfall. Matthew's master during the trial asked what motivates him to continue to survive, to which Matthew would say back that it's for revenge. Revenge on the cops that took everything from Matthew, vowing to his master that he'll kill them all, leading his master to knock Matthew down the waterfall, shouting to prove it then, bringing us to the present day. A man named Jake hears a noise outside of his home. However, when he leaves to go check it out, he finds nothing. But upon entering his home and walking towards his wife Margot, he finds her scared to death as she tells Jake that he's under the bed smiling from ear to ear. Later on in Los Angeles, a man named Carlos is leaving a club to be chauffeured around the city with his girlfriend. And Carlos is a pretty big player in Los Angeles, leading one of the top gangs in the city. However, that's all about to change as Nemesis glides down from the sky, bursting through the car windshield as he fights his way to Carlos, ultimately capturing him, and zipping off into the night sky. Cut to Carlos, surrounded by at least 50 others blindfolded inside of an in-ground pool. Nemesis then makes his presence known to everyone in the room and announces that he'll be hosting a Fortnite Battle Royale with all the blindfolded people being the involuntary contestants, in which he explains that the only way to get out alive is to kill everyone till there's only one left. And in case if it weren't clear enough, if they also remove the blindfold, they'll detonate a small bomb in their head, and well, I think you can imagine what would happen next. Soon, everyone in the in-ground pool begin to stab one another with weapons.
Dog, listen. Somebody told me this. I'm camping, all right? Listen, all the Fortnite stuff is good. You build, you run up on a John Wick, you die, you respawn. This ain't that, okay? So this happened to me. You know what I'm doing? I'm camping. I'm going to hide in a trash can. And then I'm third partying when there's 2 people left, okay? That's what I'm going to do.
Provided by Nemesis as a crowd watches on from the sidelines, horrified. Nemesis goes on to say to the crowd while the fighting goes on behind him that he's not here to take over Los Angeles or anything, but rather only hire each member from the crowd for 7 days to settle a score. Going on to say that if they help willingly, they'll be rewarded handsomely, and when Nemesis is done, they won't have to worry about the newly elected mayor promising to clean up the city. Eventually, the Battle Royale comes to an end with Carlos the last one standing, celebrating his victory. But Nemesis just shoots Carlos in the head and tells his newly hired henchmen, let's get started. For over 20 years, Nemesis has been honing his cruelty and skills, and he has planned out virtually everything for his revenge. As Nemesis along with his henchmen raid the Dubois Art Museum, making sure to kill absolutely everyone inside, either by slicing or dicing or dispersing toxic fumes into the air. After which Nemesis and the henchmen begin stealing everything expensive to fund the next step of his plan. This is where another part from the original Nemesis story gets reworked a bit, where before Nemesis originally planned to kill Detective Blake after 10 years of planning, now it's switched to a man named Joe Costello, just elected mayor, who has put over 2,000 new police officers onto the street. He's also the guy who killed Nemesis's parents, so you can guess where this is going to go. And in the middle of giving his speech, when he begins to announce the newly appointed chief of police, Wendy Gomez, her body is brought down, dangling high above the stage. Meanwhile, back over with Nemesis after killing dozens of police officers from the museum, Nemesis somehow hacks into several broadcasting channels where he then addresses the people, as he says, "Hello, children. Don't worry. There's nothing to be afraid of. If I wanted you dead, you'd be choking on your guts right now. You don't know me, but I've got such a plan for this place, and in 7 days' time, everything will be clear.
That's crazy.
Only one thing stands in my way of the scheme, and it's all these extra cops on the streets. So I pulled a $100 million heist this evening, the proceeds of which I'm going to share with all the little people. Are you listening out there? Because this is quite an offer. I'm putting a bounty on the head of every police officer in the city.
Oh, no,
I'll pay you 10 grand for every dead cop."
All right, listen, chat. What are you doing in that situation? Okay. 10 bands to become a bounty hunter. But the bounty you must collect is of those who are sworn to protect and uphold the law around you. What are you doing?
Nemesis says this as he walks into the crowd of cop cars outside, which he seems to have already blown up with various rocket launchers. As Nemesis then executes a cop on that live feed, going out to everyone. This immediately causes chaos in the streets of Los Angeles as cops are targeted left and right, with even kids gunning for the heads of police officers.
Bro, on God, I would have seen that live stream, took my suit right off. I'm not who y'all think I am, okay? Listen, you got the wrong guy.
Jumping at the chance to make 10 grand. As Mayor Joe Costello was thrown through a complete loop on how to even go about stopping Nemesis while the entire police force is either dropping like flies or quitting. But this brings nothing but pure joy to Nemesis as he watches the man who took everything from him begin to slowly lose it all. However, after the museum fiasco, the man Jake from earlier is just like, bro, why are me and my wife here We aren't criminals. To which Nemesis just shushes Jake and says that they're both a part of the plan and not to worry. Now, cutting through a few minor story beats, Nemesis essentially brings the city to its knees after kidnapping the newly appointed police chief, Reggie, by bursting through his helicopter window and nabbing him. A day goes by, and randomly the next night, a distress call goes out over by the waters, so a police unit goes by to check it out, where they find the new police chief, Reggie, handcuffed to the boat, not knowing that it's clearly a trap. As Nemesis sneaks onto their boat, tranquilizing most of the cops except for one. The last cop pulls out his gun aiming at Nemesis, but Nemesis, calm and collected, tells the cop named Eddie to compose himself and aim the gun right between his shoulder blades, allowing Eddie to get used to the rhythm of the water. Eddie asks why he wants to do this, to which Nemesis tells him that he wants him to see just how fast he really is. Eddie fires the gun, but at the moment of firing, a baton is sent towards his face, breaking his nose, and Nemesis comes out completely fine. Kinda reminds me of that Sean Strickland fight with Sneeko. That shit was so unfair. Nemesis then handcuffs each of the officers to the inside of the boat and then manages to make the boat start to slowly sink, where Nemesis explains to officers Reggie and Eddie that they were both responsible for the death of his parents,
that has to
and
be
that
like
they
the
will
worst.
both die a slow and agonizing death for it. As the boat sinks ever so slowly, Nemesis hitches a ride with his henchmen and on to the next step of his master plan, by making a suicide bomber crash a plane directly into the National Guard. It's here where we see just how inhumane Nemesis truly is from how he explains how to create a suicide bomber, by exclaiming that it all starts with a little sexual blackmail. See, Nemesis hired
that is insane.
One of his underage goons to seduce an airline pilot.
See, dog, listen. Didn't I say? Hold on, was it this video or the last? No, it was the last video. I said, what in the Jeffrey Epstein is going on? Listen, this is why this low key sound like when they raided P. Diddy. They found, they said, P. Diddy, you got a lot of cameras in here, don't you? All right, we need a little bit of footage. Would you like handing that over, big fella? You know what I'm saying?
After which Nemesis used the footage of the pair to blackmail the pilot to do his bidding, or else the footage would get leaked and her entire life would end up ruined.
Bro, I rather ruin my life. I'm not committing the suicide bomber. I'm not doing that. All right, you're gonna have to let everybody know, and I'm gonna fight for my truth. My truth is, I got finessed. Okay.
Thus, Nemesis commanded her to kill one person after the other, good or bad.
And then it turns into a cycle, a never ending of you having to do what they say. Never accept the blackmail, man.
Never really mattered. Nemesis recorded her committing one murder after the other, stockpiling on the blackmail till she did everything he said right up to the end, for it all to remain a secret. And after the bomber does her thing, crashing into the National Guard, chaos ensues on the streets, and Nemesis, along with his army of henchmen, set off to kill the few soldiers left alive. God, this video is gonna get me on a list. After this, Nemesis pays a visit to another police officer by the name of Maggie Cheng, now retired. They share a conversation about the state of the world for a few brief moments, and Maggie accepts her death, which surprises Nemesis. So he just has Jake and Margot burn Maggie alive for him. I swear it just gets more and more messed up as the pages keep turning. This ends up leading Joe Costello to arrive at Maggie's apartment to try and save her in time, but by the time he arrives, he bumps into Nemesis, leading him to shoot Costello in the leg, telling him that he doesn't get to die until Friday, silly. Later in the hospital, Joe recovers from his wounds, and in the midst of other officers trying to figure out Nemesis's motives for messing with Joe and his old unit, Nemesis begins to broadcast a new message to the people of Los Angeles, playing on a continuous loop. Nemesis in the message says, "Good morning, Los Angeles. Welcome to more chaos and disorder. But this will seem like the good old days compared to what I've got coming next. The device behind me is an atomic bomb, and the bad news is I'm going to level this city if anyone is seen in public. I've got drones in the sky watching every single street, so it's locked down again until further notice. But this could all end tomorrow if the mayor plays ball and does precisely as I tell him. I know he's recovering in the hospital from those gunshot wounds, but he can make everything right again if he meets me on the 5 p.m. train at the Pershing Square subway. Oh, and make sure you're on your own, Joe. One wrong move, and I press this red button here." As the message ends, Joe sits up and is prepared to meet Nemesis and follow through on his demands. The others in the room say that Nemesis will kill him for sure, and Joe understands that, but he has a feeling that if he at least gives himself up, all of this will at least stop and no one else will get hurt. So that afternoon, with the entire city staying indoors per Nemesis's orders, Joe heads off to catch that 5 p.m. train Nemesis wants him on. Joe arrives at the station and gets on the train, and he heads off. Joe's whole journey here is being live streamed to the world by Nemesis. Nemesis. The entire city, including Joe's wife, Natalie, are all watching the stream on their TV and other devices. And as the train is on the tracks moving, it eventually approaches a tunnel. Once it hits the tunnel, the train goes dark. When the train comes out to the other side of the tunnel, Joe is no longer in it. Everyone watching from home has no idea what happened to Joe. And this all comes to a head as Nemesis has Joe tied to the nuclear bomb in his lair. He tells Joe, "Hello, Mr. Mayor. This is the bomb I was telling you about. Are you ready to answer some difficult questions? Because the entire city is depending on you right now." As Costello was rigged to the nuclear bomb and a lie detector, Nemesis tells him that the lie detector is very sophisticated. So he better not lie, because if he lies, the bomb will blow. On top of this, the whole interrogation is being broadcast to everyone in Los Angeles. So Nemesis's first question is, are you the former detective and heroic district attorney known as the Honest Joe Costello? Joe answers yes, so Nemesis asks, and are you the current mayor of Los Angeles? Joe says he is, and so far these are all pretty surprisingly easy questions. Nemesis then tries to throw Joe off, so he asks how big Joe's you-know-what is, to which Joe gives an incredibly accurate measurement that I'm not at
8. Yo, my man is
liberty to say.
My man is Thor.
So I'm sorry. And across all of these questions, Joe is being astoundingly truthful, leading Nemesis to finally ask the real question that he wants an answer to. Nemesis says, "I want you to tell me everything concerning the arrests of Chuck and Katie Anderson for the murder of those 9 hitchhikers all those years ago." He wants to finally hear the truth about his parents. Being forced to tell the truth, Joe explains that him and his fellow officers, the ones that Nemesis has murdered this entire week, all came through the academy together, and they vowed to shake things up to clean up the city. So they solved all of these crimes, big and small, one by one together. But there was one case they couldn't crack. Who was murdering all of these hitchhikers? Joe says, "We'd been after a couple of drug dealers for a while. A husband and a wife, and we couldn't pin anything on them. They were making a killing and driving us nuts, because we've taken down everyone else in that area." Joe can't remember who had the idea, but they decided to kill 2 birds with 1 stone and frame his parents for the murders of the hitchhikers, giving themselves a perfect record and continuing to rise through the ranks of the department. They faked the evidence for Chuck and Katie Anderson and sent them both to prison for a crime they never committed. Nemesis then says, "But you didn't just send them to prison, did you? You knew they faced death by lethal injection, leaving their little boy behind in the care system." Saying to Joe, "Do you know who that boy grew up to be?" Joe realizes that Nemesis was that boy. As Nemesis continues by saying that you always had to be the best, didn't you? You always had to win no matter what the cost to anyone else. Your family must feel sick about your behavior. Nemesis then turns off the nuclear bomb, and as the video feed cuts off, Nemesis reveals his parents' coffin with his dead parents inside, brought up and presented to Joe. The next day, 2 of the henchmen Nemesis hired from the very beginning, Jake and Margot, are driving Nemesis to the airport, where they ask him what Nemesis ended up doing with Joe Costello. Nemesis explains he buried Joe Costello in the coffin with his parents and put him under the floor of City Hall, where no one will ever hear him, adding that Joe always said he would be at City Hall for a long time. He just didn't know how right he truly was. After finally achieving his revenge he had set out to claim.
My man playing that from the beginning. He said, "You got my parents out of here, so this is what we about to do." He wrote up a whole script, you know what I'm saying? Planned it perfectly. Coordinate. My man had mad drones. My man was getting mad Amazon packages delivered to his house. Okay? Jeff Bezos, you should have flagged this. But he came through.
For over 20 years, Nemesis would finally leave Los Angeles feeling somewhat content. And as Jake alongside Margot arrive at the airport, Nemesis begins to head inside his private plane. When Margot comments that everything Nemesis set out to do has tied up perfectly, every single loose end is in a little bow now. Well, all except for one little thing.
Who killed the hitchhikers?
Who really killed all of those hitchhikers 20 years ago? Who stood back and let Nemesis's parents take the blame for their crime? Jake and, It turns out that Jake and Margot were responsible the entire time. And Nemesis tells them, "Did you really think you were going to get away with this, Jake? I know what you and Margot used to get up to." Nemesis gives them both a gun and tells them, "Alright, so here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna settle this with an old-fashioned duel, and whoever draws first gets to be my butler. I've got a whole list of criminal ventures planned for the future.
Of course! She said, "Look, I ain't dying, buddy. You're dying. You're dying."
Have someone to make my morning coffee. What do you say? Does that sound like a fair way of settling this?" Without even a second thought, Margot shoots Jake in the head, and explains that it was either him or her, and she chose herself. Nemesis is more than delighted with her decision, the psychopath that he is, and says that he thinks the two of them will get along just fine. Ending the story.
Oh, he let her live? No.
That was the story of Nemesis, the complete shebang. And I'm not lying when I say that Nemesis in all sense of the word is fucked. But after
I thought she was still gonna die, I ain't gonna lie.
All of his comics that I've read, which really isn't that long of a list, I gotta say that I kinda actually like the character in a few ways. I like his entire aesthetic, not to mention the whole warped Batman vibe that he's got going on, and I really prefer the more tweaked out version of Nemesis compared to the original. Mostly because it just does everything the original did so much better and all around just feels more flavorful. Granted, the writing can sometimes get a little cringy, but if I'm being honest, I don't really mind it at all too much, because it feels like it fits the character. And not only that, I also love characters like this guy because they're like a guilty pleasure for me to read. I don't know what it is, but it's just unhinged characters boost my serotonin levels or something. Especially when they got a sick and twisted sense of humor. That's like the cherry on top. On top of this, Mark Millar also started a series called Big Game, where he essentially takes every comic book series he's ever made and combines it into one sole universe.
Hold up, is this Kick-Ass? Is that who that is? Over here? This...
So now Jupiter's Legacy, Wanted, and even Kick-Ass are all in the same series, and it actually.
We done found a new IP. Hold on, I didn't know. I only knew Marvel and DC. What's it called? Icon Comics or something like that. We might have to tap in.
Just ended recently. It's so cool, and you should definitely check it out. I have, and I loved it. But with that, this video is going to come to an end, so don't forget to leave a like and subscribe. Check out my Twitter. And as always, I'll catch y'all on the flip side.
All right, listen. This is definitely the most vile. Yeah, my man literally did whatever he needed to do to get whatever he wanted to get accomplished. All right, you got to respect it. All right. When you set goals out in life, he not only got a confession. Okay, first, he tore apart the city that tore his family apart, okay? And then he got a confession out of the person who set it all up, okay? Then he even got the people who committed the crime that they wanted to set his family up. He got them on the hook too. Yo, my man was cooking. He was cooking.